Okay, we're live. All right. Like I said, I still plan on doing probably, maybe, a full on just review of this book in completion with Brennan, maybe. We'll see what happens. But yeah, a lot to talk about. On to book two of Malazan, Book of the Fallen, book one, Gardens of the Moon, books two and three within that. I know, confusing, right? Basically, there's a bunch of like little sections of the book. Kind of, if you've ever read Dune, there's like a book one, book two, but it's all just in one novel. It's kind of like that. Anyway, um, book two takes place in Duro Justin, which is one of the last free cities apart from the Empire. Okay, and this entire section is going to introduce us to an entirely different cast of characters. But luckily enough for you, the good thing to know about this particular section is that after we are done with this section, we're officially done. I mean, we'll still have new characters, but as for the main characters, this is going to be the end. Therefore, for the rest of the book, everybody, Darujistan. Okay, thank you. Okay, listen. Marcel here. Marcel, this is when he like first came into the picture of YouTube, okay? First he came on like my channel, and then he was in a couple other like places, and then he made one of his best videos, which is how to pronounce revanchist or revanchist or all the different ways that you could say that. And so that was one of his best videos that he's made, was one of those first ones. And now he's staying true to his origins by correcting me on spelling. Oh, like Pakistan? So Darushchistan, right? All right, Darushchistan. Anyway, so the best part about this that I've realized is that after book two, we're officially done introducing brand new characters, at least main players. So moving forward, book three and stuff, it was much easier for me to deal with because I now know everybody that's in the picture and I can kind of just vibe with it because everybody is now in the picture and they're all introduced. So it's like, okay, I got it. All the key players I'm in tune with, but it won't matter because as I hear, book two has nothing to do with these characters, so I'll have to readjust and relearn all over again. But that being said, we're here. We get introduced to several things. Um, it says a bunch of weird dates in the very beginning, which are different from the dates previously. So that's a bit confusing. It says the 907th year in the third millennium, and then it also says the season of Fiandry and the year of the five tusks, whatever the hell that means. But I wrote it down because it sounded sort of important. We also get introduced to several characters, of course, that will matter for this particular section and will matter for the rest of the book. We have Cruppy. I don't know. Marcel's gonna tell me in the comments section. But that guy, however the fudge you say his name, my favorite guy so far. I love him. He speaks in the third person for some reason. Um, that's the whole thing of itself is because he comes off as like a crazy like hobo, but he's also supposedly super powerful, like a mage wise or whatever. He doesn't actually do anything that we see, but he's talked about as if he's a big deal. But then also, is he actually crazy or is he not crazy at all? Is this all like one long con? Because he always does this. And as far as everyone's aware, he's never not done this, which is like talking to third person. Um, no, yeah, I hear that it's book two is new characters, and then book three is like a sequel to book one, and then book four, like everything kind of like starts to like connect. I'm sure you say Krupp, Kruppy, Kruppe. I don't know. I was thinking either the guy that's the voice of Cogsworth from the Fallout TV show, or hear me out, Ryan Reynolds, just because I think that'd be really funny. So we can go with Ryan Reynolds possibly. Also, we meet a character named Crocus, and Crocus is I forget actually now. Oh my god, because I just read all of book three. Um, he's a part of not the Claw. He's a part of an assassin's guild within the city, I think. Um, We also get introduced to a person, or not introduced, but is mentioned of, I think, uh, Tallow Crafar or Craffair. Um, and then another cool character that I started laughing just because, dude, anything can be done in this story. Because then we cut to another new character named Crone. Who's Crone? Crone, at least as far as this part of the story is concerned, is a crow that can speak, but only to certain people, because other people aren't going to hear anything. But certain people hear this thing speak, and I just think it's amazing. Um, but this thing is in the service of Rake. We also later learn, we'll get to it in later books, serve several people. Mainly it's in its own interest, but it does serve multiple people, not just Rake, as we'll get into. But yeah, we also get introduced to Baruch, who is this politician within this. This section is a lot more political than the other bits have been, though it's only specifically the politics of this city and not necessarily to the wider realm. Like, we still have no idea what's up with the Empress really or anything besides what people within this portion of the story talk about her and other things within the Empire. But we don't actually have that broader scope as far as this first novel is concerned. But he's a high alchemist, whatever that also means. But he's supposedly uh, 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 like peaceful. Like, he doesn't like to fight or whatever. What's it called? Like non-confrontation, not non-confrontation. It's like a pacifist, supposedly. I don't know about that, but we will later learn that he has his own interests in mind, but he also makes some logical points as to we can't stop the Empire, even if we fight against it, so we might as well just like do like a peaceful negotiation of stuff. Even though from as far as we're aware at this point in time, the Empress has been known to kind of just like level places. So maybe not the best course of action. I'm not sure. I love the prose. I love the writing. I really have no qualms about it. I understand why people would have issues with the pacing, because I feel like I'm only kind of now 240-ish pages in, grasping everything. And I understand why that would be frustrating for a lot of people, because they got to invest so heavily into a story just to get into it, because it is really confusing. And I won't lie, like, even the few non-spoilery reviews I watched of this series gave me a slightly better understanding of things. Whereas if I just picked this up off the shelf out of the blue just because it looked interesting, I probably would have more issues with it. But I kind of went in knowing that it was going to be rough, so I prepared myself for that, and so it wasn't as much of a thing for me. But I think there's an argument to be made that while the prose and the writing I think is exquisite, um, and obviously he wants you to kind of just like Stephen Erickson just kind of wants you to figure it out. There is also a sense of mayhaps there may have been a better way of easing people into this, and I know that he didn't really care about that. He's been very clear from what I've seen that he just didn't care. He was like, "You're gonna like it or you're not. I don't care. Do it." Um, but I do think that is a legitimate thing to mention about the pacing, because it really you really don't really understand what's going on for a good while, and the plot is not really addressed because it's more about figuring out what's going on first. Like, first learn who these people are that you're following. You got to learn what they're about, their personalities, what they are, and kind of slowly but surely piece together what it is even happening. Which even now I still don't really know what's going on, but I have a better picture of what's going on. Like, I know they have a plan to enter this city, and there's stuff going on in the city. But that's later stuff. I gotta stay on track. Yeah, so we learned that Crone works for the Lord of Moonspawn, and Rake wants to talk to Baruch. So, but yeah, all I had to say about the assassins like guild in this city, they're like running across rooftops. It begins with like people attacking one another, and it very much just gave me an Assassin's Creed vibe. Like, they're running across rooftops, dodging arrows and whatnot. So that's the vibe I got. I also we don't meet this person when I wrote this down, but the name was mentioned and it sounded important enough, so I just wrote down Turban Orr, who's a council member. We also get introduced to Rallick Norm or Nom, I forget. He is an assassin as well. We also meet this politician lady named Liddy Simtal, and she gathers info from this councilman through sexuality because she's willing to spread her legs to get information. But then Rallick happens to kill this particular individual. It doesn't really matter that he died. That's not really the big thing there. It's just kind of just making other stuff happen. But yeah, so the Council of Darujistan wants to avoid war, and you know, other people, they're not, everybody on the council is on the same page about that. But yeah, so that's some of the politics going on within the city itself. There's a person named Ocelot who's a clan leader, and I wrote that down because it made me think of Metal Gear Solid. So, and I figured it might be important. So I just write down names every time I see them, basically, even if this person may never show up again. But yeah, there's an entire conversation that Rake has with Baruch, and it was really interesting. I really enjoyed that entire section. It gave a little bit more insight into Rake. You know, I really don't know what to make of him. He's clearly threatening. But with this series, like, again, it doesn't seem like there's any specific clear good person, bad person. Everybody seems kind of gray. Even Rake, who seems to be the most like stereotypical, like, I am the bad guy, I'm the Lich King, fear my wrath, is he talked about like defending his people on the moon thing and seeming genuinely upset about certain things. So I don't know, it was a nuanced little conversation there, but he definitely is intimidating, and it definitely seems, at least for his first book, to kind of be like the Darth Vader of this story. But that could be completely, he's completely irrelevant as we continue moving. I don't know, but so far he seems really interesting. We also get mentions of the Jagut, which I've been using this Malazan Book of the Fallen Race and Approximate Heights thing to just kind of gather my thoughts. So I looked up Jagut and made sure that was something important, and it was. And it's this thing right here. So I just wrote down that now there's no character that is a Jagut in this plot. A Jagut, I don't freaking know. But it is not, there's no character that is this race in this story. However, I wrote it down because I'm sure it will matter at some point. But I also just wrote, so it's just an orc basically, but called something else, is what I put down. We also get introduced to a character named Murillo, and Cole with Coll is the spelling. And all these characters happen to know each other, which was another thing, which just kind of made it easier to like these characters, is that they all have camaraderie with one another. They all have like really interesting personalities. They're funny even. And it was just much easier to ease into these relationship dynamics than the previous section was. We also have Croupy's Dreams, which we had started with that earlier in the chapter or the section of the book where he's talking to like other aspects of himself. I'm not exactly sure what to make of that, but he's talking to other aspects of himself. But in this particular part, there is like somebody in his dream who shouldn't be there, and so that's a whole thing that's like vaguely touched on, and it kind of like worries him. We also see, as we move on, that Croupy, blah, 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 I don't freaking know. Ryan Reynolds talks to Baruch and knows Baruch, which I thought was, I was like, oh, I didn't realize that these characters knew each other. So, and he starts informing him about certain things. Hold on, I gotta get to my next set of notes. There's so many. But yeah, so basically, when Baruch is talking to Rake earlier, he basically says that he'll like team up with him And I don't fully know what that implies because he wanted peace with the Empire, but clearly Reich doesn't. So I don't know what that alliance holds for him. And he wants power. That's his main thing. Yeah, that's definitely what his profile happens to sound like. Which I have to read that series at some point too. But Malazan is going to take a million years, and so will of time. But I'll get to it along with all the not soap opera, with all the space opera I need to read. But yeah, that's what I made my profile picture for a bit. So I have Reich right there. Definitely reminds me of The Witcher and/or freaking, as you said, Elric, but black. Um, But yeah, so we know that Rake is working with Baruch. We learn about all these characters in this particular section. Also, there's somebody targeting the assassins, but it is not the Claws, which are the assassins group specifically for the Empress, which is a separate thing. But these assassins are local to the city itself, but they are being targeted, and that's a mystery that is not fully resolved. But overall, I really like this section. I enjoyed meeting all these characters. It was much easier to flow into this than the opening of this story has been. And then, as we move on to book 3, we return again to familiar territory. So, as I said, moving forward, we no longer, or at least I, no longer have to worry about understanding new characters. I mean, there's going to be new characters, but as for main players, we have met all of them at this point for this particular story anyway. So it's all a little bit more smooth sailing from here. It's a little bit easier to understand everything that's happening moving forward. Well, Pico, I'm also going to read Cosmere. I don't know what AOC is. I am going to read Foundation and the Robot series by Isaac Asimov at some point in chronological order, even if that's not the best way to do it. The only reason I didn't do chronological order from Malazan is because people said that part of the experience is simply not knowing anything. And I guess you could say that about any story publication-wise, but I feel like some are better reading in chronological order. But I wanted to make sure that I was as confused as everyone else when I started Malazan. Dune, I have a chapter house left, and then the 2 sequels by Brian Herbert, and I'll have read every single thing Dune related, and I'll be the MVP of the sci-fi YouTubers. Actually, I won't, but I will pretend that I am. Well, it'll be interesting to meet them whenever they pop up. Yeah. Well, I heard this was originally was like a D&D campaign that they ended up making into like a whole story. Oh, right. Yeah, I'm going to read those too. By Matthew Stover. I plan on it. Yeah. See, I got stuff forever, man. I never have to worry. I'm going to have content for years. There may not be Star Wars, or now I'll have Star Wars with friends, but I'll have stories forever to read about, unless I, of course, die or something. But until then, I'm all good. But anyway, we're on to book 3 now. There's probably stuff I'm forgetting to mention, but that's where I'm going to leave it for now. I could maybe try to re-go over it with Brennan if we do like a review of it together or something when he finishes it, but he'll probably finish it before me. So as I said, book 3 is the mission, and every player is pretty much set, so we're smooth sailing from here. Yeah, he's pretty crazy with his output. So we learn, I don't think we knew this before, but Hairlock, the puppet marionette that used to be a person, is bound to Quickben. He's not like completely obedient to Quickben. He can kind of do whatever he wants, but they are connected because Quickben is I'm assuming the one that kind of transferred his soul from one body to the next. We might have talked to Younger before. I don't remember, but I wrote it down just in case. They also mentioned the Rivi and the Rivi planes, but the Rivi themselves are, and I tried to look for them on this races list, but they weren't there. But it is described as very small brown people. So I'm either imagining 2 things that came to mind is either a midget that just happens to be like a black person, or like literally a pixie. Was my 2 thoughts there on the possibility there of what they were. but they're not actually in the chapter, I don't think. They're just mentioned. So that's the thing. Tattersail has a high Thayer ward or Warren. So again, I could be completely wrong about this, but from my understanding, if you're using magic in this world, you have a Warren, which is some sort of intercessor between like this realm and the other, I guess. I'm not exactly sure, but that's what it sounds like, is that the Warrens are like how you access, kind of like if you're a weeb, the video game Persona, you have your persona, which is this thing that grants you the power to do things. And then Tattersail and Piran meet, and what a crazy crossover 200 pages into the book. But they have some really good chemistry, which will matter for a future scene. But it was a good scene between them. We also have Lorne, the adjudicant, meet up with One Arm, Dejuk, and Tesharin, the High Mage or whatever. And they have some interesting discussions. Then there's this big dinner scene, which they're all sitting down. Reminded me of like Dune. Wasn't like the same sort of context, but they're all sitting down to eat. And we learn that Tattersail, in her early years, got Lorne's family killed, which was pretty interesting. And then she quickly considers killing Tattersail until basically Dujik's like, calm the frick down. You're not who you once were. You're the adjudicant, and that's more important. And then she calms down. But that was really interesting aspect to the book. And then we get introduced to, I forgot, Piran and Sail Bone. So if you wanted some romance in this story, you got it. We get introduced to Tal, which is a Talan Amas undead person. And Lorne calls him a tool. So he says, that will be my new nickname. That's cool. So he's called Tool from now on. They also mentioned Bonecasters. And I just wrote it down so that we know that anytime I see the word Bonecaster moving forward, a Bonecaster is just Iman or Imas shaman. So that's the thing. Also Talk. I don't know if this was like a pseudonym name he was using or if this was actually supposed to be his name. But there's a section of the book where he calls himself Rendar Khan. And there's a bunch of things I'm kind of glossing over. There's a lot here. But basically, Tattersail says a bunch of things about the adjudicant that that Piran doesn't necessarily believe. And then they go their separate ways. And then Piran later meets up with Talk, and Talk kind of confirms what she was saying. So now Piran realizes that he's kind of being used and that he totally doesn't want the bridge burners to be like butchered and killed. But it seems like that's kind of the plan. And so now it kind of seems like we have several different things going on. We got Rake as an issue. We've got the entire city of friggin', I got to look up what Darujistan again. We got their whole thing going on, plus their internal problems with the council not agreeing, and then assassins being murdered and everything. And then we have the entire world story of this empire in control. But then also within the groups that we've seen thus far, it seems like we have the adjudicant kind of versus kind of everyone else. It seems like really. So we also what's the guy's name? Frick. Belrillian or whatever. He ends up seeing Tattersail and saying that she has to come back with him. He's been ordered to, and you're a really good friend, but I need you to listen to me or I'll have to kill you. And all that. And it's a really good, it's a good scene because he seems like a pretty nice giant man. But one interesting thing to note that I wrote down in between that confrontation, I should say, is that he casually mentions that they have Jahat blood or whatever. So I guess giants are part orc, which is interesting. But yeah, so basically Tattersail's like, nah, I can't come with you, and she does some crazy thing that's not explained, but other characters comment on it after the fact, though they don't really understand what just happened. And neither do I, so I can't really further elaborate for you. We also get introduced to some other characters, which is Kalar, and Brood, and they are pretty interesting. I also realized that this soul shifting technique that they mentioned is basically just essence transfer, if you know Star Wars. Um, and then we just get a mention of Fork Groll Assail, which look like alien ghosts or something, but they're right here. Is this little thing right here that they look like, which I thought was interesting. They look kind of spooky, little spooky guys. But yeah, overall, I'm heading to book 4 now. I mean, I'm not going to read it today. I got work, and I'm not going to read it on break because I try to I'm like locked in when I'm reading this. Like nothing else exists except for the story because I want to make sure that I'm understanding everything. Dujek, one arm. Sorry. Okay, he's watched his behind because I said this a while back, and he's only now commenting on that. So I must be behind on the stream. But I really have enjoyed these 2 sections, and now as I'm kind of see all the players, and I'm finally starting to get a grasp of this world. I still don't have a larger view of the world. I don't understand the full scope of the Empire. I don't understand who the Empress is. I don't, and this world is huge, and there's going to be even more things that I uncover and unlock as we get through this series. Book 2, as far as I'm aware, is completely different characters, so that's going to be a whole new thing to wrap my mind around. But as for this book, I'm finally settling into the characters, understanding all of them. In fact, this book has managed to do what most Star Wars books and Halo books that I've read and other books that I've read have failed to do, which is that in the span of just 240 pages, I think I deeply care about a good number of these people. I will say, I think Perron, I care about this person. I want him to survive. I want him to do well. I care about Tattersail. Maybe I shouldn't. I don't know, but I do. Koopy, I immediately fell in love with. Rake, I find super intriguing. Baruch is also interesting. And all the characters basically within that city, I pretty much I like all of them. I like them pretty much immediately. It was really a lot easier to get into them than it was in book 1. But yeah, it's weird how I'm only 240 pages into this, which is, I mean, it's pretty much halfway. This book is one of the shorter books of the whole of all of them, but it's amazing how quickly I've kind of just gotten behind them and care about these characters. Even though I don't think the characterization is necessarily the best in this story, I hear it gets a lot better, and that I'm gonna cry near the end of all of this. There's gonna be multiple times where I will. But as for his first book, it's not like Matthew Stover where he's like really purple with the prose, where you're deeply emotionally invested. I care about all of them significantly, but I don't deeply adore all of them yet either. But it's only the first book, and I'll see them again later. A lot of them anyway. I'm sure not all of them will survive. But yeah, overall, I hear that this is his worst book because it's the first one, and if this is his worst, then it's only up from here, right? And I still have the rest of this book to finish, but pretty solid so far. I'm just giving my thoughts as I go through. There's no real coherence to it, and this isn't a review because I haven't finished it. I'm just getting through certain sections so I can provide you some of my initial thoughts as I jump through this. But yeah, it is a crazy world. I'm mad though that I've started this journey because I will not be able to stop until it is completed, and it's Brennan's fault. Because here's the thing, I had told Brennan about this series because I had been looking up a bunch of fantasy stuff and stuff to read about after, because I'd seen Wheel of Time. I had seen Matt mention it. Matt Wilkins had mentioned it before. There was a time where Christopher Nelson was selling a whole set of them, and I'm mad that I didn't buy it. Somebody else did. And so I knew about Wheel of Time. It was on my mind. And so I started looking up stuff about it because I'm about to finish the Star Wars Expanded Universe. And while I'm going to be doing it with other people moving forward, the Expanded Universe in publication order, that's going to be really slow because it's with other people. Whereas I read much faster and I don't have to rely on a schedule and getting everybody together. I can read like that and then get a video out. But I've done that twice now. And so I want to do that with other people. I don't want to stop talking about the EU. That's like the main reason my channel even has as many subscribers as it does, is because of the EU. So I want to keep that rolling, but I don't want that to be the sole thing I'm talking about. But so I wanted to read the Wheel of Time, so looked up the Wheel of Time reviews, non-spoiler wise, made me really interested to try it out. And from there, other fantasy stuff showed up, and I eventually saw Malazan, and I was like, what's that about? And I started talking about it with other people, and Brennan said, like, that sounds awesome. And then he's like, we should totally do like a series on that together, Alex, And I'm like, yeah, I'm going to read Wheel of Time first, but definitely I'd love to do that with you. And then he started reading it. He's like, oh yeah, I'm like 120 pages in. Sorry, I couldn't wait. And I'm like, well, I wanted to read Wheel of Time first, but you have fricked me by doing this. It's either I read it now or I can't discuss it with you. So here I am now, starting it, whilst also trying to read Halo, while also trying to finish the Star Wars Expanded Universe of my normal reviews with the Legacy comics that I still need to read. But I've neglected the Legacy comics because I'm too busy reading this. They look terrifying. I'm not excited to meet them, but, we can't judge people by appearances. Maybe they're really nice. But, I mean, I don't know. I haven't met them yet. Yeah, what a tool. Peak character. But yeah, overall, pretty solid. I'm halfway through this book, and pretty soon I'll finish it, and then I'll give my thoughts on that as well. But I probably will do some sort of review special than how I normally do reviews, where it's just me rambling, because that's kind of what this is. So probably save like a proper in-depth discussion of beginning to end until I can talk with Brennan and probably Marcel. But Marcel, unless he rereads it, is just going to be going off of memory. So, but the trick for him, though, if he does come and join me in a discussion about it, here's the problem. He has to make sure that whatever he's talking about with us is not a spoiler for a future book. And if there's 10 books in a series, I imagine it's a little hard to remember what is and isn't discussed in this particular book. So that would be an interesting challenge for him to not accidentally spoil something for us. But that's that. That's book 2 and 3. We're moving on to book 4 of book 1 of this series. And we'll see what happens there. But again, loving it. I think honestly, it might, this might be a hot take, but I'm kind of like vastly more interested than I am in the Song of Ice and Fire. And that's probably because the Song of Ice and Fire tries to be like really realistic mostly, because there's very little magic except for like the White Walkers and some other things, but it's pretty grounded. Whereas this is kind of like just, dude, we got dogs talking, we got bug people, like it's just so much more fantastical, but it's like just as dark as Game of Thrones, with the added benefit of, I don't know, there's just something about it that I'm not picking up from any other series. Do I necessarily like it more than Lord of the Rings so far? I mean, I feel like Lord of the Rings is pretty much the grandfather of everything, and I feel like it's really easy to kind of slip into that world as opposed to this, where you have to invest if you're going to get into it. But here's the thing about Malazan. Okay, is what I think is happening to my fragile heart is you start reading, you either don't like it, you can't get behind it, and there's nothing wrong with that. You're not stupid, you're not wrong. Different strokes, different folks. Okay, some people just aren't going to get into it. Some people are going to read this, it's going to be too much, and they're going to drop it, and that is okay. So people are either going to hate this book or they are going to love it to death. And I don't see any in between for people. I don't feel anybody's going to find it to just be okay. I really feel like they're either going to get really invested or they're not going to care at all. And those are really the only two paradigms you're going to find here. But if you invest, I feel like you're really going to find something worthwhile here. I mean, I love Game of Thrones, don't get me wrong. I love it. I love it. I love it. I love the characters. I love the dialogue. I love the politics. None of that's a problem with me. I'm just saying, like, there's something about just being kind of like dropped into a world that's fantastical and just kind of having to figure it out. It's just kind of amazing. And it's a nice escape, and you really got to pay attention. So maybe I do like high fantasy more. I don't know. I haven't read that much fantasy, really. I've read Harry Potter, which is, and I've read Percy Jackson, and I've read Lord of the Rings and The Hobbit, like a couple, like once, and I've read The Silmarillion, and that's about the gist of my fantasy experience in terms of reading, anyway. So I don't know. I could like whole source of fantasy. I guess this would be considered grimdark if I'm getting the term correctly. I mean, it's a very dark series, but overall, I'm super interested to see what happens moving forward. And my God, this is only the first book, and the amount of information I've had to retain in my brain for stuff that isn't real and doesn't exist and won't help me in my day-to-day life. But God is in my head now. And these other books go to 800 to 1,000 pages long. So I am in it. I'm going to be stuck in this for an eternity. And not only is there 10 books in this, but we got spin-offs. We got comedy books that take place in between these books, and prequel books, and sequel series getting started. Insane. So much here. But what an interesting world it is so far. And I can't wait to explore what's going to happen next. But I'm going to head out. I got work. See you in my next thoughts processes on this. And then also if I ever discuss this with Brennan in full. Anyway, till next time. God, I don't know. Don't let Rake's sword touch you, because as far as I understand it, it's going to be more than getting your head decapitated. And it doesn't sound like you want to be on the receiving end of that sword. It sounds like it's going to do a lot worse than just kill you. Anyway, till next time, guys. Goodbye.